If you're a sales professional and you need more good leads and you're skeptical that cold calling may no longer work, keep watching. This video is for you. I'm going to give you a simple breakdown for how to structure a call that takes the pressure off the prospect. It takes the pressure off you and it works, just so long as you're willing to actually put in some work and throw some numbers behind it. And I'm not talking about theory here and not some script for you to memorize. But if you missed my part 1 video on cold calling mindset, stop right now and watch that one first. I'll put the link down below. Today, though, I'm going to walk you through exactly how to open your calls, what to say to keep people engaged, and how to turn a cold call into an actual sales conversation, even if you're not confident right now. In this video, I'm breaking down 8 calling structure items that if you get them right and do them consistently over time, you'll reach a point where you'll begin to get predictable results and sooner than you think. So if your pipeline is empty and that idea scares the crap out of you, keep watching. This video will turn your fear into optimism. Before we get into this, one thing I do want to cover is when it comes to cold calling, I have performed multi-hour workshops on cold calling alone. So even in, say, a 30-minute long-form YouTube video, I can get into the nuts and bolts of quite a bit of this. But when it comes to the particular nuances of your situation or your business or your industry, obviously I have no way of knowing that. So in order to really get this right, I would recommend go to the link down below, click on my school community and join my school community, the Sales Pros Gap. The community is free, and there you can take me up on my offer of a free 20-minute Get Unstuck call, and we can dive into your situation in a little bit more detail and make this video work actually that much more for you. Okay, the first thing that I want to cover when it comes to cold calling is the strategy going in. And I'm talking about really there is a 2-part strategy when you even begin a cold call to begin with. And the first part of that strategy is what you're trying to do is you're trying to create enough interest so that the prospect actually listens to your 30-second commercial. They need to let you deliver your 30-second commercial, but you also want them to listen. And how you do that is by creating interest. Now, the big fallacy for most salespeople going into cold calling is they think, geez, if I just throw enough credibility behind my company or myself or enough features and benefits behind my opening call, I'll create enough interest that they'll want to listen to my 30-second commercial. And I'm going to tell you, the counterintuitive truth is you don't create interest by what you say, you create interest by what you don't say. And I'll get further into what I mean here later in this video. But the second thing, as we covered yesterday in the mindset video, that the goal of a cold call, in most cases at least, is to set an appointment, but that shouldn't be your aim. The second part of the strategy going in is what you're simply trying to do is elicit a conversation on the part of the prospect. And we'll get into how that all works here again shortly in this video. Okay, so the second thing that I want to cover here is having the right tone. You know, when I first got into sales, I was taught to be enthusiastic on a cold call and have that sing-songy voice. And I'm going to tell you that that is wrong. The counterintuitive truth, once again, is what you want to do is you want to get on a very peer-to-peer level with your tone. Think late night FM DJ voice, to use Chris Voss in his book, Never Split the Difference, where he talks about this in spades. You're going to want to get very low toned and get very, very peer-to-peer with the prospect on the other end of the phone. And when I say peer-to-peer, I'm talking about small things like, and I'm going to try to use an example here. When you're using the exact right tone, the wrong way to do it is to have the upward inflection at the end of a question. Can we set an appointment? versus the right way to do it. Hey, can we go ahead and set an appointment? So downward inflection, just think that way, because here's the deal. When it comes to communication, and keep in mind, they can't see you on a cold call. All they can hear is your voice. So the words are far less important than the tone. And if you look at one of those communication pie graphs that explain how the message is actually delivered, only 7% of the message is delivered via the words that you say. Most of the rest of that message is going to be delivered via the tone. Be aware of that going into every single call you make. It matters far more than you can ever imagine. Okay, now we're getting into actually the call itself. And the way you start a cold call every single time, and I think the best way to describe this is through a pattern interrupt. You don't know whether the person answering the phone, if they answer the phone in this day and age, whether that is a gatekeeper, the lowest person on the totem pole in the company, or the owner of the company. You just have no way of knowing. So the first thing you're going to want to do is say something that throws them off of the trail, so to speak, that you're even a salesperson to begin with. My favorite way to do this is simply to ask for help. Human nature is when you ask for help, people give it to you. And you also put a deposit into the emotional bank account. So how that sounds, for at least the way I've always done it, is say somebody answers the phone. I'm going to use my first name only, and I'm going to say, "Hi, my name's Mark. Wonder if you could help me real quick." Pattern interrupt right there. You're asking for help. I'm using a very low peer-to-peer tone, and you ask for help. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to transition that into setting the rules of engagement and a slight introduction, but don't give up too much information. And how that looks, sort of piggybacking on asking for help, I would always say, "Hey, wondered if you could help me real quick. I'm not sure I've called the right place. Would you mind if I took about 20 or 30 seconds and explain to you the reason I'm calling? And that way maybe you can point me in the right direction." I've made thousands of cold calls, and successfully so, over a 35-year sales career. I only started using that way to open a call relatively recently, in the last, say, 10 years or so. And I'm going to tell you right now, I've never had that fail to work, in the sense that the person on the other end of the phone will always say, "Absolutely, sure." They have just opened you up and given you permission to deliver your 30-second commercial. And let's think about for a second why that works so well. First of all, I asked them for help. Second of all, I didn't tell them my last name or even who the company I'm calling from. That's where I get back into where I talked about the strategy of the call. You create interest enough that they actually listen to your phone call or listen to your cold call, your 30-second commercial. They have no idea yet who you are. For all that person knows, you could be one of their best customers. So the fact that they don't know who you are, what you're calling about, where you're calling from, they're going to listen to what comes out of your mouth next. That's a really critical, important part of this whole thing. And the other thing you did, you asked for permission when I said, "Can I take about 20 or 30 seconds to explain to you the purpose behind my call, and that way maybe you can point me in the right direction?" You just asked for a 30-second window, and they granted it to you. And again, another really important distinction here, they know that they're not going to be on a call with you for a long period of time, even if they sort of suspect you might be a salesperson. Okay, so as we've established, the prospect 100 times out of 100 is going to give you permission to give your 30-second commercial. And because they have no idea who you are yet, they're going to actually listen. You've created curiosity by what you haven't said. And this is, again, where it becomes real critical that you sit down and create the right kind of commercial. Most salespeople at this point think this is the time when I talk about me and my company and our credibility and our features and benefits. And I'm going to tell you, no, don't do any of that. What you want to do is craft your 30-second commercial according to one, to say three problems that the prospect may have that you and your company or your product or service can solve. So what that looks like in my case, how that would look for me if I was making a cold call for my sales training or my Sales Pro Gap community school or school community, would come off by saying, my name is Mark. I'm a 35-year sales professional and sales trainer, and I've worked with quite a few people over my career. And typically the people who work with me come to me for one of three reasons. Either A, they don't have enough prospects and they're really worried and frustrated by the fact that their pipeline always seems to be empty. Or secondly, maybe they have plenty of prospects and they're just not getting their sales presentations from the starting line to the finish line. Or maybe they're closing plenty of sales, but they're having to cut price in order to do that. Now, here's where the transition goes. Then I'm not going to close for an appointment there. What I'm simply going to ask the prospect on the other end of the phone is any of that relevant to you to where it's worth maybe a 2 or 3 minute conversation? Stop right there. So you notice I didn't ask if they were interested. I simply asked if any of that resonated with them and invited them into a conversation. Now, this is where in your 30-second commercial, you want to back pocket maybe 1 or 2 problems that you can solve, because if they say to you, and a lot of prospects are going to say, yeah, not really, you can back pocket and say, well, what about this? Like in my case, that may say, well, they're closing plenty of sales, but it's just not consistent enough. Is that rather than handle objections, just have another problem that your prospect may have that your product or service can solve in order to back pocket it to throw out there. And I'm going to tell you, when you're trying to cold call, numbers are everything. Don't try to handle objections or try to turn a no into a yes. If after you've thrown out somewhere between 1 and 4 problems that you can solve that the prospect may have, if they don't bite on any of that, that's where I say you move on. But what you're really trying to do more than anything is get a conversation started rather than go for the close. So number 7, what I want to talk about is, depending on how that conversation goes, and you've invited them into 2 to 3 minute conversation. Now, if you've got a truly qualified prospect, 9 times out of 10, that conversation is going to go way beyond 2 or 3 minutes. They're going to ask you a number of questions. There's just going to be a real world conversation, and you're going to know whether this person has some qualifications, has an interest, has a problem that you can solve. And very simply, how you close for the appointment, and this is where assertiveness comes in and is crucial. How I like to do it is simply say, I get very assertive and say, Mr. Prospect, do me a favor, open up your calendar and invite me over for a conversation. And then I'll talk about the value of the conversation. Just say that way you can, I still don't have any idea if we're a good fit, but we can sit down and talk a little bit further about your situation. I can tell you a little bit about my company and how I operate. You can pick my brain a little bit. And there, over maybe a 15-minute cup of coffee, we can determine if a further conversation is even warranted. Any objection to any of that? So simply start the conversation. Find out if there's actually something there to be had. It's a completely pressure-free situation, and then become assertive and ask to be invited in for a meeting or in for a Zoom call or whatever that looks like in your particular case. Okay, lastly, what I want to cover is the age-old, the dreaded gatekeeper. That's probably the most difficult part about making cold calls, is getting past the gatekeeper. Keep in mind something when it comes to gatekeepers. The gatekeeper isn't thinking about you. They're paid to do one thing in that role of gatekeeping, and that is keep you away from talking to the prospect you actually want to talk to. There's all kinds of stuff out there talking about how to deal with gatekeepers, and I got to tell you, I think most of it's crap. I think the right way to handle gatekeepers is not to try to bully them, not try to BS your way through a gatekeeper or past a gatekeeper. It's simply to make them your friend. First of all, when you're talking to the gatekeeper, whoever answers that phone, chances are that is the gatekeeper that answered the phone, particularly on a B2B call, which is about the only way cold calls really are allowed anymore, is on a B2B level. Assume that that gatekeeper is either the owner of the company or the exact person you were looking for anyway. So you're going to handle the structure of the call with the person who answered the phone as if they are exactly who you wanted to talk to anyway. But if you don't know if that's the case, rather than say at the end of your 30-second commercial, is any of that relevant to you and worth a 30-minute or 2 to 3 minute conversation, I should say, you're simply going to say, who would I talk to about that? Would that be you, or is there somebody else in the company? Or if you know the person you're looking for, you're simply going to say, who would I talk to about that? Would that be Joe Prospect? Or is there somebody else? Is that you that I should speak to? And then this is where vulnerability and asking for help comes in, because they're going to ask a lot of questions or just say, you know what, can you shoot over an email, or I'll take down your name and number. And if Mr. Joe Prospect is interested in talking to you, they'll give you a call back. And this is where I'd say, you know what, would you mind helping me out real quick? I'm not going to pressure, and I don't want to take up a bunch of his time, but would you mind? And I'm assuming that he's not interested in anything I'm talking about, but would you mind letting him tell me that face to face? And if you handle that right, and if you're actually genuinely friendly with the gatekeeper, there's a pretty high percentage that they're going to let you through. And if they don't, I say, don't waste a lot of time and mental energy trying to fight your way past a gatekeeper. Just leave your number or whatever it is they're asking for and move on. This is where having a lot of calling material really comes to play. Just move on. It's a big world out there. It's a numbers game. Let's not try to jam square pegs into round holes. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. Now, what I would like again to invite you to do is go to the link below, my school community, the Sales Pros Gap. I'm building this along with the community right now, but I would say if you want to talk further about this or anything else that you're running into that's a major challenge for you in sales, click on the link, join my school community. It's completely free. You can also take me up on a one-on-one Get Unstuck call where I'll spend 20 minutes with you talking about you and talking about your situation with you, and just kind of sorting through, coming up with a strategy for you getting past whatever it is that's holding you back in sales. Thank you very much for watching, and I wish you all the success in the world.